The 2023 quarterback draft class has been extremely underwhelming. After a lot of hype and attention was put on that draft class and many thought this was going to be an excellent draft class, so far through their careers it has been very underwhelming and pretty disappointing. So in today's video, I want to go through the entire 2023 quarterback draft class and talk about what I think their futures are. So as I mentioned, the 2023 quarterback draft class has been somewhat disappointing. So for that, in this video, I want to go through every single pick in those draft classes. Obviously, we're going to primarily focus on the first two rounds, but I definitely will have a section at the end of the video for every single quarterback taken outside of the second round. Per usual, there will be timestamps on the timeline, so if you guys do want to skip around, feel free to do so, but I suggest just watching the full video. And of course, if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. We are less than 2,000 subscribers away from 10K, so make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed. But let's get into the video. And we are going to begin with the number one pick, Bryce Young, who went to the Carolina Panthers. So far through his career, he has a completion percentage of 59.3%, 3,180 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. Now, unfortunately for Bryce Young, just 3 games into the 2024 season with brand new head coach and quarterback genius Dave Canales, he has been benched in favor of Andy Dalton. Now, unfortunately for Bryce Young, everything that we saw from him out of Alabama has not really translated at the NFL level. And I think there's multiple reasons for this. I would say number one, the team around him is just really poor. The offensive line hasn't been very good, even though it was pretty solid to start off this year. Last year, they had arguably one of the worst offensive lines, and then you look at the receiving corps, it's also been predictably pretty bad. Last year, they had arguably the worst receiving corps, and this year, while it's slightly better, it still is not good enough to support a young quarterback like Bryce Young. This team also does not have a consistent run game, and their defense is pretty bad also. So you take all of that into account, and you have a team that's really bad going to a quarterback that arguably needs a team around him to support him. Now, with that said, I would say that Bryce Young hasn't really done himself any favor with the actual play on the field, because we've seen veteran quarterback Andy Dalton, who, let's be honest, is not a great quarterback, but he's definitely a solid one, go in there on this team and win a game and be at least a respectable offense. So I do think it's important that we at least acknowledge the success that the team is having now with backup quarterback Andy Dalton. Bryce Young's game simply just is having a hard time translating to the NFL level. His lack of size, arm strength, and ability to scramble around in the pocket is really affecting him. At Alabama, going up against college guys and having the best offensive lineman arguably in the country, he was able to stand in the pocket for longer, extend plays with his legs, because he's going up against college athletes and not NFL athletes. The NFL is just simply a different breed. Whenever Bryce Young gets out of the pocket, it's a lot easier to track him down because he doesn't have elite speed, nor does he have elite arm strength or arm talent. So he's basically being forced to really jump over the offensive line to make plays. We've seen just really simple throws that he probably would have been able to make at Alabama look really difficult at the NFL level. Again, I think there's a lot of blame that needs to be passed around, whether it's to Bryce, whether it's to the team, whether it's to the owner, but I think everyone has a bit of a piece of the pie as to why he's terribly struggling. So what do I think is his future? Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't think he has much of a future with this Carolina Panthers team. I still believe that Bryce Young is a talented quarterback. I just think he needs to go to a team that has the system and pieces around him to support his game. And unfortunately, I just can't really think of a team that is actually going to be able to fix a quarterback like Bryce. Because for one, most teams already have their established quarterbacks, but two, most teams don't have the perfect roster to put around a guy like Bryce. Really, I look at a team like Atlanta, who already has their young quarterback of the future in Michael Penix, and kind of think that that would be a good situation for Bryce, but again, they already have their young quarterback. So for somebody like Bryce Young, I think he really has maybe 3 options. Number one, a team to take a chance on him. Number two, to stick it out there in Carolina and make it work. Or number 3, to just become a career backup. Which is really unfortunate because, again, I think coming out of Bama, this was a guy who was really talented and was playing at a very high level at Bama, was taken number 1 for a reason, but it just has not translated, unfortunately, to the NFL level. But next up, we are going to talk about the number 2 overall pick to the Houston Texans, CJ Stroud. Now, for CJ Stroud, he has come into the NFL and just been arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league from day one. Last year, he had 23 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and so far this year, he is up to 7 touchdowns touchdowns and 3 interceptions in 5 games. For his career, he has 30 touchdowns to only 8 interceptions and already has over 5,500 yards. Now, Stroud went to a Houston Texans team that was already sort of in the process of rebuilding their roster. They had some established guys like Laramie Tunsil and Nico Collins and some veterans on the defense, but this was a team that wasn't really fully put together. And then last year, CJ Stroud joined this Texans team and instantly made them better and instantly turned them into a quote-unquote contender last year. And so they went in all in this year to bring in guys like Daniil Hunter, Azeez Al-Shaair, Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, and now this team this year is already a Super Bowl contender. So I don't really have to go into extensive detail on this pick. Obviously, CJ Stroud arguably probably should have been the #1 pick in hindsight. But what's crazy is that he was taken number 2 for a reason. Bryce Young was the consensus #1 overall pick, not CJ Stroud. But because Stroud went to a team that had picked a better head coach, that had a more established roster, and let's just be honest, because he had better physical traits than Bryce Young, he's been way more successful. I think there is kind of a what-if scenario of what would have been the case if Bryce Young was taken number 2 and Stroud went #1, and I kind of think nothing really would change. I really do believe that Stroud would have been successful no matter where he went, whereas for Bryce, I just think his lack of physical attributes really affects his ability to have any sort of success at the NFL level. So for Stroud, I think he's going to be an incredible quarterback for many years to come. I think he'll be a top 10 to top 5 level quarterback for the foreseeable future, barring any sort of fall from grace, which probably won't happen. I think Stroud is a great character, I think he's a great leader, and I think he's going to be a fantastic quarterback moving forward. However, moving on to the #4 overall pick of the NFL draft in 2023, we're talking about Anthony Richardson, who went to the Indianapolis Colts. Now for Anthony, it's been a bit of a roller coaster to start his season. We all knew coming out of college that he was one of the most physically talented and maybe even mentally talented quarterbacks of the entire draft class. The issue coming out of college and the reason why he didn't go #1, nor #2, nor #3 was because he was unbelievably raw. This is a guy who played less than 20 games in college and just really did not have a ton of playing time or experience on the field, and so the Colts took a chance on him. Now, me personally, I loved the fit of Anthony's play style, which is kind of similar in some ways to Jalen Hurts when he was at Bama and Oklahoma, going to Shane Steichen, who was the offensive coordinator and the one that was helpful in the development of Jalen Hurts, to be the head coach and offensive mind for this young quarterback. And early on last year, despite the injury, it looked like things were going in an incredible direction. To start off last year, he had 3 passing touchdowns to only 1 interception and added on multiple rushing touchdowns and rushing yards as well. The offense looked electric under Anthony Richardson, and this team looked like it was going down a bright future. And then unfortunately, through the first 3.5 games this year, it just has not been as pretty as it was last year. He's definitely had some great moments, like some ridiculous throws and some incredible plays. He's also had plenty of just terrible highlights. This year, he only has 3 touchdowns to 6 interceptions and only 1 additional rushing touchdown, but he also has 3 fumbles. That being said, those 3 fumbles, none of them were lost. They were all recovered by the Colts, but still. On the year, he technically has 9 turnovers to 4 touchdowns. He's just fortunate that those 3 fumbles were all recovered. Now, I still personally believe in Anthony Richardson. I still believe in that raw talent and ability because the arm strength is clearly still there. The anticipation and accuracy just isn't quite yet consistent there yet. I think once he can get that down pat, I think he's a great quarterback. But then there's another issue, which is the injuries. He suffered a season-ending injury last year, and this year he's already had 1 injury that left him out for last week's game and potentially might leave him out for the upcoming week. So we'll have to wait to see how he returns from this injury. But I just think it's just been a bit of a roller coaster for Anthony. Again, I still think he is very talented. I think there's a lot of question marks about what his career is going to look like. Number 1, if he can't stay healthy. And number 2, if he can't solve these turnover issues. Because I love Shane Steichen, and I think he's an awesome offensive coordinator. But at the end of the day, if he can't fix Anthony Richardson, then I don't know what this quarterback is going to be. Again, I really do believe in the talent of Anthony Richardson, and I am definitely willing to give him 2, 3, 4, 5 even years to develop into the quarterback that I think he can be, because I truly do believe he's got the talent and the ability to be one of the best in the NFL. It's just been unfortunate that we haven't been able to see that on the field because of injuries and inconsistencies when he is on the field. So for Anthony, I still think he's worth that 4th overall pick, but I guess time will tell. Next up, we have to move all the way down to the 2nd round, pick number 33, to go to Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans. Now, last year, he didn't play until I want to say like week 8 or 9 of the NFL season, but when he came in there, he looked pretty good. Again, kind of similar to Anthony, there was definitely some inconsistent play, but for the most part, I think that we saw some flashes and some good plays. It made you feel like this could be the quarterback of the future. Last year, in a very small sample size, he had 1,808 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And with that came a bunch of excitement and a lot of optimism about what he could be in the 2024 season. However, unfortunately, to start off this year, it just has not been very pretty. It's been very inconsistent, and he's like on a legendary run of memes, which I think is definitely not something that you want to be if you're a high-tier quarterback. So far this year, he has 604 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, which puts his grand total for every single game he's played so far this year at 2,400 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. The issue for Will Levis is really the fact that he's just really struggling with consistency. One play, he's going to make an incredible touchdown throw that's just a ridiculous, only he can make type throw. And then the very next play, he's jumping up in the air, throwing a lateral that gets picked off for a pick 6. And that's a tendency that he just has to break. I think when he's playing within the system and playing clean and, not dumb football, I think he's actually a pretty solid quarterback. But the issue is it just feels so ingrained in him to try to make a play even when the play isn't there. So for Will Levis, I still think that he has a bright future in the NFL. Obviously, we're only less than like 16 games into his NFL career, so it's definitely not time to bench him or to think about replacing him. But I will say, of all the quarterbacks that I've talked about in this video so far, I do think that Will Levis has the shortest leash. And that's because the Tennessee Titans didn't put a whole bunch of stock into him. He's only a 2nd round pick, whereas these other guys were all top 5 picks in the NFL draft. So because of that, if they were to be a really bad team this year, they could easily just go into next year's draft and spend a 1st round pick on a rookie quarterback. Because at that point, then, if they're in a high enough position to get that quarterback, then Will Levis obviously didn't turn their season around. I still think Will Levis has a future in the NFL. Is it going to be a starting position? I'm not sure. I definitely think he has the talent to get there and to stay there, and I think Tennessee's a good spot for him, but he has to find that consistency, and he just has got to stop making these really dumb, idiotic plays. However, as I mentioned, I want to go through every single quarterback taken between rounds 3 through 7. Some of these, they have really not gotten any opportunities, so I don't have a lot to say about them, but I'll go through them relatively quickly so I don't keep you guys for too long. At round 3, the Detroit Lions took Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. Now, he was coming off a season-ending injury, and so far this year, he hasn't played a whole bunch. I believe he played in the preseason and looked somewhat well, but obviously the Lions have their quarterback of the now and of the future in Jared Goff, so I don't really think Hendon Hooker has much of a future, at least as a starting quarterback, but as a backup, I think he'll be there for many years. Then there's Jake Haener, the Saints backup quarterback. Jake Haener just hasn't had many opportunities. Obviously, they took Spencer Rattler this year, who is going to be the starting quarterback whenever Derek Carr's out, so maybe Jake Haener can get some opportunities if they're available to him, but I don't think he has much of a future as a starter in the league. In round 4, the LA Rams took Stetson Bennett out of Georgia. Now, Stetson Bennett actually has had some flashes, at least in the preseason. He obviously has had some bad moments, and it hasn't quite looked pretty for him, but I do think he has at least a future in the NFL as a backup. Again, he's one of those quarterbacks that just hasn't gotten on the field, so it's really something that we don't know a whole bunch about, but I don't think that his future is going to be a starter, but I do think he could be a very solid backup for many teams for many years. Next, and really the only quarterback that's had some sort of opportunities so far in their careers, is Aiden O'Connell of the Raiders. He was the starting quarterback for some time last year and is now going to be the starting quarterback moving forward for the Raiders. I think Aiden O'Connell is a good quarterback. Of these quarterbacks I've talked about, I think that he has the brightest future, especially as like a backup, maybe occasional starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't think Aiden O'Connell is a starter level quarterback, but I think we've seen enough from him to be really happy about what we've seen from him as a really solid backup. Then after him, we have Clayton Tune out of Houston, who went to the Cardinals, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's on the Browns, Sean Clifford, who's in the Packers, Jaron Hall, who went to the Vikings, Tanner McKee, who went to the Eagles, and Max Duggan, who was drafted by the Chargers, but I don't believe is in the NFL no more. All of those quarterbacks have not gotten any opportunities, even really in the preseason. We've seen them play, and some of them had some flashes like DTR, and Clayton Tune had a couple good looks here and there. But for the most part, all of these guys are going to be practice squad, backup level quarterbacks that don't really get too many opportunities as a starter. Jaron Hall has had some opportunities, but hasn't looked very good. I do think DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, could be something in the future because he looked really good in the preseason the year before, but we'll just have to wait and see. So obviously the 2023 NFL draft class hasn't really panned out like we thought it would. Guys like Bryce Young, Anthony, and Will Levis are really struggling to make their mark on the NFL level. But I do think time will tell, and we have to give these guys time and patience to see if they can develop to be the quarterbacks that we think they can be. But of course, if you guys did go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.